everyone. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak today, and Jane for coordinating this. Slides are located at the link that you can see at the URL below, and I've posted it in the chat as well. The goal of my talk today is to share pointers that I found useful in my journey, and in hope it will help you on your path and navigate your career. The concepts I find are applicable to other career trajectories, so not specific to product management, but I will highlight frameworks and resources that are unique to product management. Why am I qualified? I've led a team for 5 years and coached a couple others through their careers and had moments of massive doubts and found these concepts repeatedly helpful to push past obstacles in my career and life challenges. I've also been on a conference and meetup binge, so this is also a collection of inspiration from other accomplished leaders. A bit about me. I am from Singapore originally, and I have spent half of my life in US now. Most of it in Chicago. In recent months, some of it in San Francisco. So those in those areas, please reach out and connect. And if not, we can always connect virtually as well. Coming from Singapore, I love food. Not like Crazy Rich Asian style, but what I do love is to take photos of food. I am a very private person, so I don't really post them anywhere. Feel free to reach out for food recommendations as well. Next is that I don't enjoy talking about myself because I am very much an introvert, don't like the attention, and prefer to listen. What I've learned is that it is meaningful for me to help others realize their potential. With meetups and conference binge, I've been inspired by leaders who have shared their journeys, and this is my way to share words of advice. Sharing my story is a very personal challenge for me to overcome that unwarranted guilt about talking about myself. So thank you, and I'm very grateful for Anita B for this opportunity. And your audience today. And hopefully this will be helpful for you. If not, please give me feedback. I was also very unfit when I was a child. What I mean is that I needed an inhaler to run a half a mile in half an hour. And in my teens, I had an asthma attack after a mile hike on the Great Wall. But now I'm able to run a 9-minute mile. And last year I covered similar distance, about 1.5 miles on Machu Picchu Trail, which is more than 2,000 feet in elevation gain. So how I got around to this was building my endurance through high intensity interval training workouts over time. That is HIIT for short, that you commonly hear. What it is that it breaks down a workout into small, tangible intervals that you can then build your muscle memory over time. I'm also risk adverse in nature. So I've been at FactSet for, which is a company I'm at for 12 years. I've learned a tremendous amount and always growing. 7 years of it was in product, and we are hiring. So check out the career website after this if you have a chance. In 2016, I got the opportunity to represent FactSet at Grace Hopper, and this leads me to my first aha moment. Ginni Rometty was the opening keynote speaker at Grace Hopper Conference 2016. This phrase really stuck out to me, and it propelled me to my current role as a product manager. Especially given my risk aversion, it's important that I'm always honest with myself if I'm being scared or comfortable. So whenever I get stuck, I apply the HIIT concept and break things down into problems where it's a doable goal. Focus on the learning and the building out of my knowledge, and then importantly, applying that knowledge, because that's when the growth actually happens. When I think about knowledge, it's about asking questions with an open mindset. So thinking about that you can learn something from everyone. Kind of to what Karen's point was, that's like finding the motivation of different people is really important. And so that's what I think about when I mention building that knowledge. It doesn't have to be just about doing research. And then after you kind of do the research, it's about applying that knowledge. And one thing to kind of be aware of when applying the knowledge is to not fret about the mistakes. Instead of worrying about the errors that you're going to make, I think about being grateful for the opportunity to re-examine should something go wrong. with every low light or mistake that happens, there is always growth. So I'm always thinking about striving for progress versus perfection. And sometimes there's going to be questions that I'm afraid to ask, or it's difficult to apply that knowledge because it is such a vast issue. So in those situations, it's important to identify what is the inertia that is in my head, and confront that inertia. So how do you confront that inertia? Step one would be to break it down into doable goals, like I mentioned. And what does doable goals mean? It's like, if it feels like it's too big of a task, break it down into something smaller. Think about what is it that you need to cross that threshold, and what it is that you can control, and who can help you to do this. And with that, you kind of have the pieces that you need to overcome the inertia. And once you overcome the inertia, I tell myself that the hard part is over, and think about what is that is doable. And because I've done it before, I can do it again. And that mindset of that it's doable is what really gets me through it. And over time, with repetition, I built the mental connections that are needed in my mind. And I learned to be uncomfortable, because that's kind of where you put yourself in the opportunity, the situation to grow. There'll be days when this doesn't feel good, and it's okay, because I will make sure I remember that I'm growing, and that's the part that really matters. If you talk to hiring managers, that's one thing that's really important, is it's that hunger to learn. That's something to keep in mind. So back in 2016, I was leading a team of financial engineers. What that is it's a hybrid of software developer and financial subject matter experts. And the company was going through a process transformation from waterfall to agile management. For those who are not familiar with those terms, it is a waterfall is a traditional sequential development cycle where you move from one step to the next only when a phase is complete. Whereas agile is more thinking things in smaller terms. It's new relative to waterfall, and was introduced in February 2001 with the idea that it's an iterative, very client-focused minimum viable product, so more commonly known as MVP. An opportunity came up to lead my team through the transformation, and I was very hesitant. Maybe because of my risk aversion, my team had a great system down. I had challenged the status quo and grown my team from 1 to 7 developers, and we covered over 10 products. We were the go-to team to execute projects in a pinch. I had mastered the delegation and sourcing meaningful work for them, and it was very good for their growth. However, my aha moment was that this was all very comfortable for me. I needed to practice what I preach, to be uncomfortable. I embraced the opportunity to be a product lead, and it was a lot of growth from a product management perspective. I learned about good agile practices, particularly the retrospectives. So that is a meeting at the end of an agile software development cycle where the team would gather and reflect on how past iteration went. And they're identifying improvements to work on going forward. So it's definitely a very good time to reflect and improve. So a common term that you'll hear is what to stop, what to start, and then what they want to continue. Agile seeded this idea of iteration practice in my mind, and I would not have been as into it if I had not embraced this opportunity. And in the process of it is what I interpreted as an experimental mindset. Once I kind of got good rhythm into it, I started asking the question back to what Ginni Rometty had said was, am I growing and am I being too comfortable? I started seeking roles outside of my comfort zone, to chat outside of my domain expertise, with the idea of optionality to explore new technology and learn a new industry. I had a couple interviews internally, but the fit wasn't quite right until I came upon a role in an incubating unit. It was a new department and very entrepreneurial, which was what I interpreted as an experimental mindset. And so that what brought me to being a product manager. I had an amazing interview with my hiring manager. The interview was a case study on an actual problem her team was looking into, and I had so much fun dissecting that problem with her. Unfortunately, I didn't actually get the role that I interviewed for. What happened was instead, my director created this role, senior ragtag product manager, for me because it was a better fit for my skill sets and the team's needs to source new tech. So I'm sharing this because the role that I interviewed for wasn't open to Chicago, for one, and the role that I got today was not posted. And if I have not asked and taken action and overcome my own inertia, the answer would always have been no. You don't know what else is on the table. So it's always good to kind of just put it out in the ether so that you can gather information in the process. Fast forward, reflecting on my career for this webinar, I've learned that the managerial role that I was in 2016 is more, technical product manager is more representative of that description in my past role. It is more, so the difference between a technical product manager and a product manager is that one is more, the former is more tactical focus on execution, on the how-to, and a product manager is more focused on the strategic, the what and the why. So think of it as developmental costs versus opportunity costs. And that's kind of you're solving different problem sets in a sense. So confronting my inertia has propelled me into my current role and ultimately to speak today to you. And more importantly, the experience has also helped me identify my superpowers. Prior to it, I tapped into my strengths intuitively as a manager, but never intentionally honed it. So mine are that I as I mentioned before, I am a listener. I have an intense curiosity to understand, enjoy executing, to break things down into smaller chunks, and I'm a servant leader to focus on others over my self-interest and very focused on transformation. And I have this inherent desire to experiment as an early adopter as well. So these are strengths that I drew on when I was a manager. My decisions and actions were taken from a position of strength because it was natural. So going back to the Strengths Finder book that Karen had recommended, it is coming from a position of strength is a really good place to be. And that's kind of what Strengths Finder highlights. And as a PM, you want to rely on listening. It is really a key thing because the focus is on seeking to understand before being understood, to be aware of other perspectives and why that is important. What this does is that it surfaces things that you do not know or do not think might not already know, and allows you to build mental models of the current state of things and surface win-win situations. So how do you find your superpower? What I recommend is to focus on the 3 E's. What's easy to you, what's effortless, and what's exciting. So this kind of help you learn more. And why you want effortless is because then the time that you're going to spend on it, you're not that focused on it. You're not like counting down the minutes. And that way you can really dedicate your time and really grow in that area. And another way to think about it is, what are people saying about you? Further down in my slides, I've also included resources for self-evaluation. I've recommended Strengths Finder for one, and there's a couple others like Better Profile and the DISC personality test. It's important to note those characteristics that will complement you. And the last piece of advice is to ensure that your actions are impactful so that you understand what it is that would be successful. Easy, effortless, and exciting. So think of it as your passion. What is passionate? What are you passionate about? What kind of keeps you up at night? I hope that clarifies, Annie. So why is it important to understand the measure of success, or what is impactful? Because this is how you would succeed. You want to be asking, what are the biggest pain points and how are you set up for success? This is something I wish I clarified with every new manager or every new role I had. And so that's why I'm sharing this with you. And I heard this just last month at and another event called by Women in Product. Yali was the keynote speaker. And I thought this was a really important thing, and that's why I want to share. Because what does this do is that it ensures that you are solving problems that will be valued, and that way you are set up for success so that you can kind of build on that momentum. And you have the resources to solve the problem. Something that Karen and I were talking before this was being in a startup environment, not having the resources to solve the problems you need makes it so that it's that much harder. So asking that questions ahead of time, you'll be kind of more prepared on what are the things that you need to solve, and whether you have the resources you need to solve it. And so this is somewhat similar to what Karen had shared before in a diagram. And this is a very classic Venn diagram for product management, popularized by Marty Kagan in his book Inspired, which I highly recommend if you are looking to go into product management or kind of understanding technology development in general. Business is about maximizing business value and achieving business goals and maximizing return on investment. User experience is about the voice of the user inside the business, and technology is about understanding the technology stack enough to make the right decisions. This was my path into product management. It is one way to go about it. As a good product manager, you want to be experienced in at least one, but passionate in all three, and conversant with practitioners in all of them. And what I did like is that Karen had shaded that area versus kind of saying to stay within the bounds. And I've not thought about it that way. And I think that's a very good way to think about it, because product management is not a one size fits all. There are many backgrounds and roles that leads into product management, and titles and responsibilities are defined differently across roles and industries. Listening to Karen's story, the thing that kind of stood out is that while she's a regulatory affairs manager, her responsibility and roles kind of sounds like product management as well. So a title might not mean something, it might mean one thing to that role. It's more kind of understanding what that relates to you. It's just one representation of product management. So I want to show you this GIF. A GIF that I found where this is what a product manager is, and this is a UX designer. And yet different companies or teams might kind of define it differently. So defining what that is and understanding that is very helpful. But it also means that that's why things and boundaries are, when it's unclear, it can cause confusion when people don't know who is taking what. Here are a couple other mind maps that you can look at. This one, and this one. I wouldn't say one is better or more accurate. It really defines on the role that is defining and you're looking to do. So I strongly advocate for you to chart your own path and define what product management means to you. Important to be open-minded on the career, but focus on the skills that you want to build. It's similar to building a personal roadmap. One of the key things a product manager has to do is to identify what the strategy is, build kind of the step-by-step things to take you to achieve that strategy. So if you're not in the space, one thing you can do is think of yourself as the product and how would you build that? And that kind of is a really interesting story that you can tell if you're not in that space yet. So whatever your background, you want to be thinking that you have a unique lens, and that translates to opportunities that you can see that people might miss. And that's how you can add value as a product manager. And how would you build a roadmap? The key thing is to acknowledge the struggle by asking questions and focusing not so much on what that would go wrong, identifying that kind of North Star that you have, prioritizing what that next step is, especially if there are any inertia or roadblocks in your way, reinforcing your strengths so that you're coming from a position of strengths and reducing your weakness along the way. A consistent theme that I've seen in my career is that communication is key. I think this is something that Karen had kind of stressed as well, is you want to be thinking about your audience, because different things mean to different things to audiences, and understand what you do control. If you notice, I was clarifying what certain acronyms were, because that's something that I noticed that's really important as a product manager, is to understand the different vernaculars and lingos across different teams. That kind of is important to kind of level set that. So lastly, this is the set of resources that's available. Women in Product is a not-for-profit organization that is dedicated to help women in product. For those who are looking to explore that route, I would strongly recommend to join that group. They're a very good community, and I found them to be very helpful. Two interesting blogs to follow would be Marty Kagan and Ken Norton's blog. They're highly recommended. These are the other resources that I found useful as well. Difficult Personalities is this new one that I just learned. It kind of highlights different types of personalities across the software development cycle. I found it useful from thinking from a negative space perspective. So thinking about this personality is someone I do not want to be, so I make sure I think about it and try not to exhibit those characteristics when I'm working with people. So to conclude, when you feel stuck, find your superpower, the 3 E's: easy, effortless, and exciting, and chart and own your own career. Clarify what's expected of you. Strive for progress, not perfection. Oh, okay. I will grant the permission for the slides. And so feel free to connect and reach out to me. And I hope sharing my journey helps accelerate and empower you to take the next step in your career.
Great. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. I really appreciate you sharing some of your personal journey, personal experience, growing as a person. You've developed all these skills throughout time, and I think that's great. Thank you. And Nina says, thank you. It was really helpful to her, and she agreed on the introvert part and decision making to steps to grow in your career.
You're welcome, Nina.